Today I'm going over how I rig up my Canon R5C for extended handheld shots or tripod shots on my commercial video shoots, turning it from this to this. The R5C battery life is pretty terrible, with it lasting about an hour before it dies on the LPE6 and H batteries, or about an hour and a half on the LPE6P batteries. For shoots where I have to do long takes such as interviews or scripted talking heads, or if I just mainly want to go handheld with my shots, I'll rig it up with this 99 watt-hour V-mount battery that powers both the camera and the monitor for hours on end. With this, you can hold the rig balanced by just the top handle here, and I'll typically have my hand on the lens as the second point of contact. This is great for slightly lower shots, and it feels really natural to hold if it's around your waist level or just slightly above it. For a third point of contact, you can also press the setup against your body like this, because the overall setup is now longer. And the V-mount battery provides a pretty big contact for it to feel comfortable on your body over here like this. For shots that are chest level or higher, I still end up using the original grip with my wrist strap, which is also pretty easy to hold because the R5C grip is pretty big and comfortable. So with this, you have a couple of different ways of shooting things. You can shoot like this, you can shoot like this, and of course with the top handle here, you can also go closer to the ground as well if you wanted to. The point of this rig is to give you everything you need to shoot for hours on end without changing batteries. But if your shoot requires you to switch between gimbal shots and handheld shots all the time, honestly, it's a lot faster to just change the camera battery itself rather than changing it from this rig to the gimbal and then back to this rig. After trying a bunch of different pieces from SMALLRIG, NEEWER, and Tilta, this is the setup I personally find to be the best for my needs in terms of functionality, price, and ergonomics. The matte box doesn't always come with me, and I only use it when I'm shooting outdoors in the sun, or if there are multiple studio lights that like to hit my camera lens at certain angles. The price of this build, not including the camera, the monitor, or the matte box, is $413.39 in Canadian dollars after tax. If you include the Ninja Ultra and the Nitze cage on this monitor, it comes out to $1,764. For the matte box, we'll add another $200 or so, for a grand total of $1,966. But honestly speaking, unless you specifically need to record 8K ProRes RAW, I would suggest saving that $1,300 on the monitor setup and just get a cheaper monitor that does what you need it to do. Before I got a job that required specifically 8K ProRes RAW, I used to use a FEELWORLD monitor that could be bought for as cheap as $130 instead of $1,300 for this Ninja Ultra, and it worked perfectly fine. The matte box, of course, is also optional. Now, let's break down the build. As you can see here, I'm using the Canon R5C as my camera, and the main lens I use for video is usually my RF 15-35mm lens and an f2.8L. That being said, this handheld rig also works exactly the same for the Canon R5 and the Canon R6. The first piece I have here, which is kind of the backbone of the whole thing, is a SMALLRIG half cage. Now, because I'm a hybrid shooter, I don't like the feel of the cage extending to the grip when I'm shooting photos. And oftentimes for my shoots, I'll be shooting video and then switching over to photo mode in between and then back to video. On the bottom of this cage is a giant Arca Swiss plate with also indents here for the little safety locks that some of the Arca Swiss mounts have. And what this means is that this will fit your tripods or anything else that can adapt to the Arca Swiss mount. And it also means that I don't have to use these little plates anymore to go on the bottom here, and that helps in making this camera build a little bit smaller. This cage also has a really handy little magnetic tool over here that's both a small Allen key and a flathead screwdriver of sorts. And this is the only tool you'll need to put your cage off and on your camera, because the only mounting tools this needs is the screwdriver for this bolt over here, as well as this little Allen key for this bolt over here. It's also really handy just to keep on you because it is magnetic and it slides in just like this, so it doesn't take up any space, and it's just nice to have a flathead screwdriver when you're on shoots. That being said, if some of your tripods do use Allen keys, you're very likely going to find that this Allen head is way too small for any hex bolt that you might have. The only thing I found this useful for is only this bolt that mounts this cage to the camera. There are multiple mounting points for this cage to be secured onto the camera itself. One of them is obviously this screw over here. Another one is this little locking pin that I was talking about. And the third one is actually this buckle over here that's meant for a neck strap. To install this on your R5C, R5 or R6, you will have to take off the lens first. So that will slide on here just like that. And that's pretty much in place. This little pin is really good because once it's seated in there, the whole cage pretty much slides exactly into place. And like I said before, because I do shoot a lot of photos, I really like just being able to hold the camera on the grip here without anything else being in the way. Now, another big reason why I got this SMALLRIG cage was for this. So this is a little protective piece that screws onto this hole over here. And what these do is that it protects the head of the cables coming out of your camera. So there used to be two here, but I lost one for the USB-C on my first shoot, unfortunately. But I've never really had a problem with the USB-C, and it's more so the micro HDMI that always breaks on my cameras. So this little piece here just gives me a lot of peace of mind knowing that my video transmission will be consistent and my micro HDMI cables won't break. The only thing to note here that's a little bit annoying is when you have this already on here, you can't really access the flap. So before you put this on, always make sure that you have this flap out of the way and you take the screw here and it just goes on like this. So there is room for this to slide a little bit. And what I like to do is put in the HDMI cable here first, slide this to the bottom edge of the HDMI cable, and then lock this piece in place. And then I will lock this other side afterwards. And I'll show you this later on in the video when I connect it. This little flap here, I never really know what to do with it. So either it just kind of sits like this, or it sits like this, as out of the way as possible. But there's no place for it to really sit to look clean, unfortunately. Once this is all on here, you can then put on the lens. So again, my main lens is the RF 1535 because I can get the wide shots that I need to get at 15 and also have 35 for more of a medium shot. And finally, before we move on to anything else, you might have noticed that I have this little Peak Design quick release over here. And I never really released this quick release strap ever, but this is meant for the Peak Design clutch hand strap. So to put this on, you just slide it into place like this. And thankfully there is a really nice spot here specifically made for hand straps. So once that goes on there, flip it back over, thread this in here, and it clips on just like that. So I love using wrist straps because I don't like having neck straps pulling down my neck when I'm shooting. And this strap has been with me through about 3 cameras already now. I've got it since I've had the EOS R, and then I switched to the R5, and now I have the R5C. So this has been about 4 years old, maybe 5 years old, and it's held up amazingly. There's a little bit of fraying on the top here because I used to always take this off and on whenever I put it onto my gimbal. But other than that, it's been great. Where you slide in your hand like this, and this strap here, you can just pull to tighten it to your hand. You might be a little bit worried, and I kind of was when I was first putting on the strap because this strap is pretty much the last safety before the camera falls on the ground if an accident were to happen. That being said, I can completely release my entire hand and this strap holds it on extremely well. This camera's not going anywhere, and a lot of times where I just shot like this and I only have my fingers over here on the grip and the only thing else holding it is this strap here, and it's been perfectly fine. I've shot like this leaning outside of cars at over 100 kilometers an hour for rolling shots. Whether that's video, photo, everything has been perfectly fine with this hand strap. And if this were to break, I would definitely get another one. Now this is what my camera typically looks like if I'm shooting photo or if I'm shooting quick handheld shots that are just say a couple minutes every take and I have time to change my battery when I need to. For this setup though, we're talking about much longer shoots. So that's where this NEEWER V-mount battery comes in. So to power the camera and the monitor, we'll be using the NEEWER PS099E. This has 99 watt hours and 6800 milliamps. And there's a really nice screen at the back here that tells you how much power is left and also how much power is being pulled out of each port. This is really helpful when you have a loose cable somewhere and you're not too sure where. You can just tell from the screen over here exactly which port is getting power and which port isn't getting power. So this battery has a D-tap over here that we'll be using to power the monitor. And over here, we have a USB-C port capable of power delivery and also a USB-A port. To mount this, we have the SMALLRIG V-mount battery plate. Now I try to save money where I can, so I've tried the newer version of this before that's slightly cheaper, but I found the newer V-mount battery plate to be much thicker over here as it extended out about 3 times the thickness of this, and it's also just really loose because both of them do have this tilt mechanism, and the SMALLRIG one actually holds this battery in place and doesn't have much play versus the newer one will just make the battery kind of go like this, even when it's fully tight. To put this battery on this plate, all you do is just slide it in, and then you're good to go. And you also have a little tab here where if you push this, it slides out just like that. For some reason, the tab on this is much smaller than the newer one, which I actually like because this is as big as I need the tab to be to get the battery out, but it's not crazy big for no reason. So this little part here extends so you can adjust the distance from your camera. Over here, you'll unlock it with this tab, and then this just slides down here on the cage. Once it's on here, you just lock it with this tab over here. Now over here, you do have a little lock lever. Simply turn that, unlock it, and this will go all the way down like this. So once this is folded down, you can then take your screen out like this and fold this back up. Now I do use this with my other cameras as well, like the R7 that I'm currently shooting this with right now. But note that with the R7, I don't have a cage. I only have one of these little mounts over here on the bottom of it. And because this little mount is not as thick as the cage, I find that the SMALLRIG V-mount battery plate doesn't sit as low as it does on this R5C. So for the R7 over there, when I have the battery all the way down, the screen does hit this little pivot point right here. With this cage right now, the screen just clears it, and it maybe just ever so slightly scruffs it on the way out. So the screen out, I'll just put that back up and lock it into place, and this is not going anywhere. Now you can either choose to have the screen in or out. Obviously you want it out so you're able to control your camera. So usually I'll just have it out like this, and when I'm not shooting, I'll plop it back in like that, or I'll turn it the other way around and plop it like that, just so I can still see what I'm doing without having this extra piece out here. So this is currently what the rig looks like. Now it's perfectly fine to hold this with just a grip over here, but after a while it does get a little bit tiring because you have all your weight spread out this way here and you're holding it right in the middle over here. To fix that problem, I'm using this NEEWER Top Handle that mounts onto the cage using a 3/8 bolt with our relocating pins here. So because this is a 3/8, this will take the bigger hole here on the SMALLRIG half cage. And the great thing about this cage is that it also has these little holes for the pins over here. So once you put this in here like this, you have this one bolt over here that attaches this to the cage, and you also have the 2 pins to stop this from sliding side to side. And now it's starting to look a little bit more like a rig, but the best thing about it is that it's currently balanced on one finger. So with this handle facing back like this, the balance point is right around this ridge over here. And it just makes it really comfortable to hold, to use, and to kind of move around as you need to. Next, we'll move on to the camera monitor mount. So that screws in over here, and this is what it looks like. It extends a little bit further out here. So when you're holding your setup like this, your monitor is far enough away from you to see it and not directly in your face over here. It's also a little bit higher up, so it's nice if you're shooting mostly shots that are chest or below, which is the majority of my shots, because you don't have to tilt your head down as much to look at the original screen all the way down here. We'll put this aside for now, and I'm going to go over the Atomos Ninja Ultra monitor for a little bit. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I got this monitor because I specifically needed a recorder that could record an 8K ProRes RAW as a client request. Now this monitor is absolutely amazing, the build quality is really good, the screen quality, the brightness, everything is amazing about it. The only bad part is that it takes a lot of batteries. Even if I don't use the recorder function, which I pretty much don't ever do now because the R5C can record internal RAW. The back here takes one of these giant Sony NPF batteries, and it'll last maybe a little bit over an hour on one of these batteries. But again, this adds weight and I like to go as light as possible with my setups. So instead, I'm using this adapter that comes with, and I have a little cable here that adapts this to DTAP. Now, if you have the Ninja Ultra, it already does come with this, and this cable usually goes out to a USB-C. But because I need the one USB-C port on my V-mount battery to power my camera, this has to be a DTAP. This also happens to work with my gimbal setup too, because my gimbal has a DTAP as well. On this monitor, I also have a Nitze cage, and this is just a nice Amazon cage. It's full aluminum, It's not really that heavy. It does add a little bit of bulk to it to all the corners here, but it also gives it a lot of protection. Now, I take care of my gear a lot, but I find that the monitor, whether it's on my handheld rig or my gimbal, is always the first thing to kind of get knocked against the wall sometimes when you're walking around. So it's just nice to have a little bit more protection to such an expensive monitor slash recorder. But the main reason why I like this so much is because it has all these different mounting points over here. So whether you're trying to mount this monitor in landscape or in portrait mode, there are pretty much mounting holes on every side of this cage. On top here, you also do have a cold shoe, which I never use because there's obviously a bunch of cold shoes over here, but I guess it's kind of nice to have as well. The one annoying thing I will point out about this is that because it does attach to the Ninja Ultra using this bolt over here, it gets rid of the one mounting point that would perfectly center this monitor. So now to mount it, you can either mount it here, 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 or here on this side, and they're all obviously offset. And also, like I said before, unless you need to spend the money specifically to record 8K ProRes RAW, or for whatever other reason, I would not buy this monitor. The price of this monitor is over $1,000 Canadian, and while it's really good, it eats a lot of batteries. It's heavier because it is a recorder, and honestly, it's just not really needed. There's a bunch of different monitors you can purchase for a much better price. And if you specifically need 8K ProRes RAW, you will have to buy this if your camera supports it. That being said, after I bought this, I did sell my FEELWORLD monitor that I used to have, and I do absolutely love using this. One more thing I forgot to mention is that this Nitze cage has these little holes here. Now, I'm not too sure what it's for, but I found that it's perfect to have a little piece of Velcro over here, and I use this for cable management for these two cables coming out of this monitor. It's not that much of an issue for the handheld rig over here, but when I have this on my gimbal, the monitor is stationary, but the camera is moving around with the gimbal. So I find that's really important to have these out of the way and secured so it doesn't get in the way of the gimbal movements. Now, I won't go over this in any more detail for this video because it's not for the handheld rig, but if you want to see my video on how I've built my gimbal setup, the link will be up there. Now to attach this, now I try to attach the monitor as close to center as possible, but again, because that bolt for this cage is attached to the monitor in the center, I can't put it exactly in the center, but yeah, now it's attached. So this is currently where we're at with the build. Let's attach the cables. So these two cables out of the monitor, I like to route these underneath the handle over here. And the D-tap would just go into the right side of the battery. And I like to bundle up this cable over here between the V-mount and the camera, so there's not too much excess cable going around. Put this screen back. And like I said earlier, we're gonna slightly loosen the bolt here. And then we're also gonna loosen this bolt over here. And then you put in the micro HDMI cable that everyone hates. So you can see this is still a little bit loose. I like to push this part a little bit like this, so there is a little bit of pressure against the head, but not too much. Tighten this bolt here, and then to secure it, you tighten this bolt here. Now this is secure, it's not going anywhere, the head is not moving, so the port on the camera is safe and it won't break. Next, we have the USB-C to C cable that powers the camera through this V-mount battery. So let's pull this little flap up like that. Now I have a 90-degree connector head for this, just so it doesn't stick out as much, but it's not necessary, it's just a nice to have. So that plugs in here like that, and then same thing, I run the wire in between the V-mount battery and the camera body, and then the screen can go back like this. And if I didn't lose this during my first shoot, I would still have a protector here, but I currently don't. And this just plugs in like that, and the camera's charging. You'll also see that the camera's charging because of this little light over here, as well as the screen that lights up over here on your V-mount. We'll give this monitor power a little test, make sure that it does turn on, and as you can see, it turns on, and we're good to go. Now lastly, we have this SMALLRIG Mini Matte Box Pro. I'll move this rig aside for a second as I go over this. So coming from the car world, I'm an absolute sucker for dry carbon fiber, which is honestly the reason why I got this matte box in particular. But obviously there are functionality reasons as well. I like that this has fins on all three sides here to block light coming from the top as well as both sides. And what I really like about this is that it has flags here that extend an additional 40 degrees sideways to prevent even more light from spilling onto the camera lens. The mounting system is a clamp here that's tightened with this adjustable knob over here, and this is 95 millimeters. Now, 95mm is a really big diameter size for lenses, but it does come with adapter rings that will adapt 67mm, 72mm, 77mm, and 82mm. And the Canon RF lens that I'm using, the 1535, as well as my 2470, are both 82mm. So to put this on, you first take off the lens cap, and that's what this piece is here. This is the threaded on adapter ring. So you just thread it on like this, nice and tight. And you also do have threads over here. So if you want to put an ND, a polarizer on here, you can still do that with your screw-on types. And if you wanted to, your lens cap fits perfectly back there as well. Now that the adapter's on here, we can thread this on here. Now there's two annoying parts, in my opinion, with this matte box in particular. The first annoying part is that you have to actually thread on an adapter. That takes a little bit of time. And the second part is because it's just a clamp-on system, you could have this off axis pretty easily if you're not careful. That being said, on the top over here, there is a little indicator that marks top dead center, and that's a little bit better when it comes to try to level this thing, but it's still pretty annoying. But once that's on there, that's pretty much it. And again, you can put a filter on here if you want, or you can put your lens cap back on here like that. But usually once you have this on here, you don't use a lens cap because you can just fold it in like that and it protects the lens from any dust. And that's it for this handheld rig. Again, I only use this for specific shoots where I need to continuously shoot without a gimbal, or if I want the handheld look for the majority of my shots. If you're interested in seeing what my gimbal setup is like, check out the video linked at the end of this video. Now, I usually like to go as light as possible with my gear, but in this case, the weight of this rig here really does help in stabilizing the footage. It really is a lot easier to have stable movements with a heavier setup than it is with a lighter setup when you're going handheld. It also does really help to have a third point of contact with the back V-mount battery over here, when your first point of contact is your top handle, and then you can hold your lens like this and just press this against your body like that to get some of the shots. The links are included in the description below of all the parts that I've used to build this rig. If there's anything I missed or anything you have questions about, please feel free to let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you guys found value from this video, a like and sub would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.